Welcome to the Run from the Norm podcast, where we explore what motivates and inspires unique individuals to run from the norms of society by embracing creative self-expression, one run and one adventure at a time. I'm your host, Jake Reynolds. My guest today is somebody I've known for decades, one of the most kind-hearted, empathetic, and optimistic people I know, Trevor Churchman. I love Trevor. He's just a super cool dude that loves his family, loves his job, and absolutely loves getting outside for a great running adventure. Trevor has ran ultra marathons, half marathons, 5Ks, 10Ks, and everything in between. But the thing that truly sets Trevor apart from most is that he has managed to run every single day for over 9 years now. That's right, every single day for over 9 years. Mind-bending, I know. Trevor is a veteran and an ER nurse, and we spend plenty of time talking about what life was like on deployment in Iraq, managing mental health as a first responder to some absolutely heart-wrenching scenes, as well as what it was like navigating the COVID pandemic as a healthcare professional. Through it all, he's kept a smile on his face, an empathy in his heart, and an Altoid or two in his mouth. Please join me for this extremely positive and uplifting conversation with my dude, Trevor Churchman. It's time to run from the norm. My guest today on episode 6 of the Run from the Norm podcast is my good friend Trevor Churchman. Trevor, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I've known Trevor for, it's probably been, 25 years or so now. And I want to get into something that I think is absolutely amazing and blows my mind is you've been running every single day for over 9 years now. And I want to deep dive into what that looks like, what your daily routine is, how you maintain the continuation of it through the ups and downs of life that we all hit over the course of 9 years. But I'd like to ask you to start out, where did you grow up and what were you like as a kid? I mean, did you run around the neighborhood? Was it something that you enjoyed when you were young? Or
Actually, I didn't run earnestly until I was in my 30s.
Really?
Yeah, as a kid, I was an only child. I'm from Jerome, Idaho, a tiny little town by Twin Falls. But no, I wasn't super active. I played soccer poorly for a while. I was a mediocre football player in high school. I've got an uncle who ran track, but I enjoyed
it wasn't something that you were interested in necessarily.
No, I got into football because I loved sprinting and running. I just didn't realize that I could do that without getting my ass kicked. But no, as a kid, I did love getting outside. When I was younger, we lived out in the country, and being an only child was like me and my dog. So we just go wander, the 80s, so you were allowed to be feral. Like my parents would be like, see you when it gets dark, right?
Right.
Don't get abducted.
Yeah, come back with some dirt in your nails.
Yeah, exactly. So I did wander a lot and get to play outside, so I had a good feel for it. I liked camping. But really, honestly, I mean, it's also the generation where Nintendo hit.
Oh, yeah.
So suddenly there's a whole new world in your bedroom or inside.
Super Mario Brothers, Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, and my mom usually worked 2 or 3 jobs, so a lot of that time was, playing Super Mario Brothers 3 and jamming on that. But I had friends that would live a couple miles away, and it wasn't a big deal to just go outside and then have to hoof it for a couple miles. And then later, as a runner, I don't think I realized how important that was or how much I enjoyed it until I was doing it on purpose instead of out of necessity.
Yeah, you had mentioned while we were on our run this morning that you're going back past some of these places where you said you grew up and you have these memories and you're revisiting these places that you were. What's that like?
Super therapeutic.
Yeah.
Because it's not always good memories, right? Like you see stuff, you're like, God, that's where something bad happened. And I think there's something freeing about being able to run past it and be like, I'm good. 30 years from now, you're going to be running by on purpose, laughing, enjoying the sunshine. Like everything that feels like it's the end of the world today isn't. So going back and revisiting these places, I mean, I live in the house that I grew up in. I live in the house my mom grew up in.
That's crazy.
My grandpa grew up in. My great-grandparents built a house.
What's that like?
Well, my kids can't hide anything in the house.
You're the hide and seek champion of the house.
When we moved in, man, I was like, there might still be an empty bottle of Southern Comfort in the attic. But it's crazy too, because my poor wife's coming in and she's like, I'm going to paint this. I'm like, you can't paint that. That's been yellow since 1952. And we had a house fire, and that was one of the hardest things about going back in that house was every inch of that place had a memory attached to it for me. But it was also good because it was like a fresh start. So then when it became our house after the fire. It was our house, not just this house that I had lived in and my family had lived in. And like we talked about, like if we ever split up, I get the house because all my pets are buried there.
Yeah, you know where the bodies are buried.
Exactly, literally, yeah. So growing up there, my best friend John, we've been friends since we were in preschool. Back then, like chicken pox, right? They'd have chicken pox parties because you'd want your kids to get it early so they can develop the antibodies immune system. Mm-hmm. And that's how we got paired up is he had chicken pox. My mom sent me over there to get infected. And we just never stopped hanging out. Go get sick with your
friend.
Yeah, exactly. Go get chicken pox, come back. And then we never stopped hanging out. And now our kids play and it's kind of a trip.
Do you have a lot of those same friendships that you had when you were younger?
I'm really lucky, yeah. So I've got two friends that I've known, John since preschool, my buddy Shane since like second, third grade.
Wow.
So it's a trip, man, because I see his kids playing and our kids are getting into a little teenager trouble and then start bitching about your kid. And then your buddy's like, remember what you were doing?
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh, he's doing okay.
Tiff and I keep having that conversation right now with ours too. The kids are going through things and she's like, well, remember what we were doing at that age? Like, but that's different.
Oh yeah. You started talking with those guys. I'm like, thank God they're not doing what we were doing.
Oh God. Yeah.
But the whole community's like that, especially because I run every day. I see these little parts of town where I have all these memories or forming new ones or putting things to rest. One of the first things I had a friend a few years ago that I had deployed with who died. And I ran past that house because one of the officers that showed up on scene called me if there. He knew we were good friends and he kind of broke the news to me. And I remember that was a real big part of the grieving process for me was being able to run past there. Because it kind of made me feel close to him and like help that grieving process of the most horrible thing in the world happened there. But if I can make it part of my run, I can normalize. It's not that place of fear anymore or grieving or sadness. Is you can kind of internalize and just process that.
That's interesting. So what do you think it is that's giving you that perspective to look at it that way and it's not something that you avoid altogether?
Because when you run a route, part of the best feeling of running a really long or just a hard run is that feeling of accomplishment. Mm-hmm. So I think part of it comes from embracing that instead of running away from it is you're taking ownership of it. It's an experience. Mm-hmm. Every run is an experience and it's full of potential.
Yeah. And
it's the best part and the worst part. Like, let's say you're going on a trail run. Academically and intellectually, there's a potential that you could twist your ankle on this run. There's a little bit of danger in it. So you teach yourself to acknowledge and discard.
So where do you think you learned that? And I'm asking, let me preface this. I'm asking because we've known each other for, again, a long time. And I look back when we were kids, I say kids and we were, late teens, early 20s. We were, yeah. But our perspective on things was completely different. I mean, we were partying and we were, a little bit more lost and weren't quite so focused on moving ourselves forward.
Yeah.
Am I leading a little bit too much there?
No. I think I was always a little introspective. I think it's one of the benefits of growing up the only child, right? For a lot of time, it was just me and my mom. And so my mom worked a lot. I wound up living with my grandparents in high school, but I spent a lot of time by myself. And I think as a naturally fairly introspective kid, I was really self-critical. Like it was always, I should be doing better, which isn't always a negative thing. Like we should always have some ambition to be like, I did good today, but I bet I could do a couple more miles tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it can be healthy, but I do think that that introspection comes from a lot of solitude, and that's a double-edged sword. I mean, it's good to be resourceful. Like, it springs to mind, remember the Hatchet? You usually have to read in like elementary school.
Yeah.
That kid learned to live on his own, right? But if you told a kid like, hey, we're going to drop you off the top of this mountain, you're just going to live through a plane crash. Like, you monster.
Yeah, you're a horrible person. What are you doing to me?
Right. So this is the good and bad. The introspection came with it. I had some really good friends that I still have now, and then made friends along the way. And I think that's why I ran so hard in that direction was I felt like I belonged finally. And it wasn't just the partying, but what we were doing, we're all doing together, right? We were genuinely having fun. That's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, it was bonding.
Yeah.
I remember us spending night at Buster's, drinking beers, cleaning the whole place, right?
Right.
Remember that?
That's one of my fondest memories.
Yeah. And everybody had a blast.
Yeah.
And that's, I think what it was is
sense of community and a sense of purpose.
Family.
Yeah. 100%.
Especially if you struggled with that as a kid where you didn't have it. I think that's where you see people fall into good and bad trends and groups and participating in things that may or may not align with their values because they get that sense of belonging.
That's a great point. I hadn't really thought about that was probably one of the best things about it is we were all lost. We were all doing our own thing, but we were still coming together and united around whatever that common goal might happen to be, which, we were clean and everything at that point, but it was fun. Yeah. It was just the point of being together.
Yeah. The common bond. Exactly.
Yeah.
Doing things together and having fun and just being ourselves. And that's an ultra running community.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. You find people who are eccentric and come from totally disparate backgrounds, right? Yep. Like I remember the first River No Return is coming out of that second aid station going up, and I'm running next to this guy, and I was kind of passing him. We were kind of leapfrogging just a little bit, and he's older guy.
And you pushed him in the bushes, and you ran past.
Yeah, because he's probably still there. And I was actually it was my first year as a nurse, and I wound up talking to this guy, and he was a physician from the same area.
Oh, wow.
So we started chatting. He's giving me insight, like, well, here's what you should look out for. Like, this is what really good nurses do. And we went on for a few miles, and I headed down a path because, you know, it was a little faster at the time. And that's the beauty of that running is everybody there is generally a runner, right? Not a lot of people sign up for an ultra if they hate running.
Yeah.
They might hate parts of running. So you are instantly provided that sense of community. You instantly have something common with them. Like that translate directly into nursing. One of the things that I love about being a nurse is developing like rapport, relationships, even very briefly in the emergency department, especially if somebody's really agitated, right? Like somebody, that's probably the worst day of their life. If they're in the ER, they didn't want to come down there.
Yeah.
It's something bad prompted them. They had to go in and put themselves in a very vulnerable position where they're going to take their clothes off and strangers are going to poke them with sharp implements and ask them really deeply personal questions. And being able to find something in common with them is one of those first steps. A lot of times I'm getting vital signs. I'm like, where are you from? You know, what do you like to do? Or, you know, if they've got a bunch of tattoos, we'll start talking tattoos. And you find that common ground that can start leading to that relationship.
You start building trust.
Yeah. Whereas out on a trail, you know that dude runs. You got something in common, and then you wind up having these hour-long conversations on a long run with a total stranger, and then you just kind of
find out you have more in common than you don't.
Yeah, and then hit the aid station, and one of you leaves, you may never see him again, or you may see him at the finish line or not, but for half an hour, you have this best friend to run with. Coming out of Bayhorse, River No Return, where it just sucks the whole way.
Yeah,
like,
it's straight up forever.
Yeah, and you're like, I can't quit because this dude's next to me. He's jackass won't quit either. So
I might as well keep going.
Yeah. So you develop these great little mini relationships. And you talk about veterans coming back. That's the other thing is you get these relationships in the military, people with totally different backgrounds, totally different beliefs, who suddenly are best friends forever. That outside of that environment, without essentially trauma bonding or like they may have never even spoken to each other, but now they're super dedicated, they're loyal to each other. You see those guys maintain those relationships forever from across the country. And I think running is pretty similar, and you have that shared experience that's special, whether it's good or bad, because there's great on both. Like there's been days that suck running, there's been days that sucked in the military, and they had great days on both, but you share those with people that only a handful of people that you get to talk to understand it. Same with nurses. It's a weird, surreal situation doing compressions and CPR, trying to save someone's life and being able to laugh, like looking at somebody across from you and there's just the ridiculousness of the situation and how high stakes it is. Without context, it could sound terrible, but like I did last week, we had a good outcome. I talked to the lady the night before last at the hospital. She's like, man, my chest hurts. I'm like, well, that's because I broke your ribs.
Because I was beating on you.
Yeah, but
how do you maintain that then? Because you've been through some serious shit. I mean, through the military and some of the things that you've experienced and places you've gone. And then now you've been through a few different components of being a nurse, ER. You lived through the COVID times as a nurse. What are you doing outside of running? Or maybe it is all around running. What helps you maintain such a healthy and happy focus and outlook on things? I mean, are you reading books? Are you listening to podcasts? Is it music? You're an amazing artist. Are you getting the outlet through your art?
Yeah, it's like this giant Venn diagram, right? I have all these concentric circles that meet up in the middle, and I'm super lucky. I have this great family. My wife, who, like you think, is every day for over 9 years, I take off. For good or bad, part of running is you have to be a little bit on the selfish side once in a while.
Right.
In a healthy way.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I struggled with realizing that it's okay to have boundaries. It's okay to prioritize yourself a little bit.
There's a difference between the healthy level of selfish and being self-centered.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You nailed it. It's okay to have boundaries. It's okay to say, I deserve the effort of putting some focus on myself every day. But my wife, she picks up that slack. Like if a kid needs picked up from school or dinner, like she's super supportive of, no, I got it. Because, I mean, on the back end, she's doing herself a favor because, God, nobody wants to see me without some runs.
Without getting some run time in. Yeah. Tiff's the same way. It's, you need to get outside.
Yeah, exactly. Like, have you gone for a run yet?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's time.
It's about time.
So I've had a lot of support there. And, we talked on the run a little bit about imposter syndrome. And I still get that a little bit because I show up like Wilson Creek. I was at the front of the line at the starting with you and Jose Cervantes. And I was like, this is not a survivable situation.
And everyone else is looking around thinking the same thing.
Right. And that's the beauty of running. And I think it humbles you is there's always somebody a little bit faster. And if they're not in this race, there's somebody out there training who's going to be.
It's a great point.
And at first I was like, I got to be that guy. I need to work hard. I need to be faster. I need to, you collect a couple medals and you're like, you feel really accomplished, but you also feel like, well, shit, now I got to
What do I do now? Pressure's on.
Yeah, you got an ultra sign up. You look at the finishing results and you're out there, you're like, well, now I got to be that guy.
Yeah, you post a picture on social media and now it's like the next one's coming, people paying attention. I got to show I'm running faster.
Especially people who aren't in it and don't understand, every run's different. They're like, oh, you're like David Goggins, right? I'm like, no, God, no.
On the other end of that, to them, you might be. It goes back to your point of context. For people that don't really understand the differences of, Goggins is kind of on a level all his own, but at the same point, to them and where they're at, what you're doing is kind of that level.
Yeah, and I'm super, super lucky. I stumbled into running, literally.
That's a great segue. Let's go with that. What got you interested in running? What caught your attention initially in the first place? And then after having that curiosity, what actually made you do it?
I was legally mandated because I joined the National Guard and they have PT tests. So periodically you have to run a 2-mile run and do push-ups and sit-ups. And talk to most anybody who's been in the Army, how to do PT tests. Push-ups aren't bad, sit-ups kind of suck. Everybody dreads the run. And I was the same way. And I'd been in for several years before we deployed. Sometimes you have downtime, like you're pretty restricted, right? So you can go to the gym and everybody wants to get yoked. And I was no different. Like everybody wants to work on glamour muscles and have huge chest, biceps, all that shit.
Yeah.
And then I would do the token effort of I wanted to do well on the run because my first 2 PT tests did great on push-ups, pretty good on sit-ups. And I remember the first time I did a run at Gowan Field in Boise, I crossed the finish line and threw up.
Oh, wow.
Because I had to push, man. It wasn't because I was like trying to be a rock star. I was literally like, holy shit, I'm going to fail this run. And that was at my age group. I had like 17 or 18 minutes to run 2 miles. And it was a stretch, man. I had like kicking in the ass come to the finish line because I didn't want to fail. Because if you fail your PT test, I mean, ultimately you can get discharged. So
everything's riding on that.
Yeah. Because if you fail a PT test, you're flagged. You can't get a promotion until you pass one. You lose out on training and you look like a shitbag. And I want to be a shitbag. No. So when we were deployed though, like that was part of the thing is I wanted to get a 300 my PT test, which is like your max score. It's the max amount of points you can get in every category.
And what happens if you get a 300?
You feel real cool.
Huh.
Oh, you get I think I got a little patch.
Oh, okay.
But it also counts promotion points. But you're living in a fishbowl, right? So there's very little room for accomplishments.
And that gives you just that little bit of a leg up.
Yeah. And it's an environment where everybody's competitive. I was in with all dudes. We were deployed. There's a little bit of competition. Same thing at the range. Everybody wants to be the best shooter. You want to be good at PT. And there was like guys, PT studs that like were benching like 325, just yoked, but generally struggled on their run. And then I figured out over time, like, because I get on the treadmill, and that's how I train for it, is I crank the treadmill up and see how long I could sustain like a 6-minute pace. And then I started noticing like getting off the treadmill, like, well, maybe I'll do 3 miles because I was starting to get that chemical release of feeling pretty good.
Feels real good when you're done.
Great. So I do like 3 miles and I'm like, shit, that's okay. And then when we were coming home, I mean, because they try and prepare you pretty well. It's not like it used to be, I think, especially like the Vietnam guys, like literally they'd finish their tour in Vietnam, get dropped off at a bus station. All right, cool. Go.
Good luck.
Live. Which is why they had incredibly high suicide rates and they had a really bad environment coming back to. Ours was much better. I got free coffee at Dallas Fort Worth Airport. They lined us, like it was great. But they tell you coming back, like you need to find a hobby. You need to set some goals because when you get home, you are not going to feel like you are home.
Do they help you with showing you how to set a goal? What's a realistic goal? Or do they just say, hey, you need a goal, go figure out how to...
Pretty much.
Really?
Yeah, because there's a ton of us coming through, right? And everybody wants to get home. And I remember being in line and they're like, the guy in front of me who'd deployed before is like, hey, when they're doing their questionnaire, just remember everything is no. Because if you say yes to anything, they're going to pull you aside. They're going to want to do counseling or some bullshit where you're going to get hung up for like another couple of weeks. So no matter what happened, you didn't see anything, nothing bad happened. You're great mentally. Just
let me go.
Shut up and get through line.
Wow.
Like, well, yeah, I want to get home. So that's what I did. Which in retrospect, if we could change that culture a little bit and look at more as, hey, you're in this line, you have the opportunity to get a bunch of resources going home where you're not going to want to go home and drink yourself to sleep every day.
Do you think that's just kind of a macho culture of it coming out or?
Well, yeah. And it's just a natural, everybody wants to get through line, right? And it's a pain in the ass and nobody wants to talk about, because you're also talking to people who've maybe never deployed. It might be a civilian counselor who's real warm and fuzzy. And I just spent 10 months interact with a bunch of dudes where warm and fuzzy was not the culture.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to talk.
You don't relate.
Yeah, this guy doesn't get me. And we're like, yeah, we're taking mortar rounds or whatever. And he's like, oh, what's that like? I'm like, well, I really don't feel compelled to educate you right now. And I'm just trying to get through this line to get home. So I got to go fail a hearing test in a few minutes because I don't wear a goddamn earphone. But
I can tell you a bunch of words, but I can't actually get across to you what the real experience was like.
Right, because you've already done it, right? Mm-hmm. They're already going to say, oh, I'm so sorry. That's got to be really difficult. And they mean it, and they're sincere, and it's an inconvenience. Yeah. And I try to remember, keep that in mind as a nurse too, is empathy is one of the most valuable skills any human being can walk around with. And it gets stronger the more you use it. I think mutual suffering is good for that. It makes you understand the idea of someone else's perspective.
Yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it.
If everybody could employ it a little bit more, I think there's a lot of problems that could be alleviated by just taking a minute and not even purely altruistic. Like as a nurse, I have very limited time, especially in an ER where it's fast paced, right? So the sooner I get a patient to cooperate with me, as soon as I can help them understand, I need to get this IV started. I need to draw some blood. I need to do that so I get medication on board and get some fluids going because the guy next door might be having a heart attack. I need to get my ass in gear. Mm-hmm. That guy in the next room is not their problem.
Right.
They might care, but it's purely academic. So if I can develop some empathy with them and I can understand where they're coming from and create rapport with them where they genuinely feel and understand that I care and that I'm moving fast, not because I don't care about them, but because I care about all my patients, they're a lot more tolerant with me moving fast, getting the IV started, getting these things done because they don't get that sense that, oh, he's just trying to get out of the room. They understand I'm trying to get to the next room. That's what benefited me, was slowing down and thinking, if I had to come in here and get undressed by a stranger and then wait and wait and wait, because it takes forever doctors to get in because they're doing doctor-y stuff. And nurses are usually understaffed, right? So we're in the next room, then we come running in, and all of a sudden we're in a hurry. And they're like, well, you're in a hurry now, but I've been sitting here for an hour waiting for somebody. And I'm a little salty about it. If I can understand why they're salty because they've been waiting an hour, and I can acknowledge like, hey, man, I know you've been really patient. Thanks for waiting so long. I was tied up in another room, but you are important. So I brought your medication with me. It's a twofold benefit. It helps them feel more comfortable and helps me do my job and helps me move faster. So there is some selfish intent where I need to get to the next room.
But in the way of getting what you need, you're giving them even more of what they want.
Yeah. If I can create that empathy between the two of us, it's a pretty powerful thing, right?
Yeah. Like, so how do you maintain that? Sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
How do you maintain that? Because I'm assuming you're surrounded by other nurses that might not feel the same as you do, that might not approach situations the same as you do, especially when you're in this pressure cooker environment. What are you doing and what habits or thoughts or tricks do you employ to make sure that you keep yourself in that headspace?
Well, I go through a lot of Altoids.
I noticed that. We were sitting out there. I saw you rifling through your Altoids. Yeah, that's the trick, huh?
Yeah, I got that from my mom, actually.
Huh. I guess I need to buy some Altoids.
You absolutely should. It's been beneficial to my career as well. And honestly, you get somebody in a high-pressure environment like being a patient in an emergency department. They can be snappy, especially if they've had to wait. Because sometimes they've had to wait in the lobby for hours to get back. Mm-hmm. So they're pissed off as soon as you
and they're not feeling good.
And they fire at you. And there's literally been times where I walked into a patient's room, somebody had like toe pain or a cough, and they're pissed off they're waiting. I just walked out of a room where somebody died. And they're like, well, it took you long enough. And I'm like, popping open a can of Altoids and take one out gives me that 3 seconds.
Interesting.
To pause and be like, okay, from their perspective, they waited a long time to get in here. They finally got in here, and then they had to wait longer. They don't know
what you just went through.
What I just walked out of.
That's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought of it like that.
So I can't punish them because it's real easy to be like, you know what, asshole? I just got done starting 2 IVs on a 2-year-old, and they were screaming, and their parents are scared. Fuck you, man.
Yeah, and you stubbed your toe.
Right. But in their world,
that's serious.
That's a big deal.
Right.
Right? Like it was enough to motivate them to incur the exorbitant, unreasonable cost of healthcare to come down, sit in the lobby, wait, get undressed, get hooked up to a machine, and then be, from their perspective, forgotten about for half an hour. Mm. So if I got treated like that, like I could see why they'd be a little pissy.
Sure.
And I have the advantage of working in healthcare where I know chances are the next room, something's happening.
Yeah.
So Altoids give me that pause.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's all tools for empathy.
Well, and that kind of ties in where a lot of people react and they don't take the time to respond. To your point, you have that can of Altoids and somebody's snippy with you. You're giving yourself that mental moment to slow down and consider your response rather than snapping back and being like, well, fuck off. You have no idea what I just went through right now. But I'm in here and I want to take care of you. So if you get over yourself, let's get to business here so I can get to the next problem next door. Right. Super interesting.
One of the things I pulled out of school is bioreaction, right? Your sympathetic versus your parasympathetic nervous response. And that's usually what they call it is fight or flight. And it talked a lot of, it's called bioreaction where, Tiff kicks in the door right now, we're both going to, like, your heart rate shoots up, your eyes dilate, like you have that physiological response, which is evolutionary, right? Like responding to predators and fear. And that's stimulated largely by emotion as well. So learning about that clinically helped me manage it more when somebody bites my head off or a doctor yells at me for something I have no control over. And I want to go back at him and be like, look, asshole. And I'm like, okay, he's also got a full caseload of patients and maybe he's stressed out because something isn't going right. Like,
and if I snap back, what's
my ultimate goal?
Yeah.
And that goes same back to ultra running. Like ultimately the biggest thing that I've taken out of running is the person I'm most competitive with is myself. And my biggest goal coming out of a run is I just want to have a good run.
Maybe we'll jump in there. So when you were first kind of getting into running more, you said you line up and you're looking at the people around you and I don't belong here, imposter syndrome, which we've all struggled with. At what point through your running journey did that start to shift to where you were like, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with who I am and my place in this and what I'm going to get out of it?
A couple of things. Part of it was running. Part of it was some like the EMDR therapy we talked about.
And for those, because I wasn't as familiar either, can you explain a little bit what EMDR therapy is?
So EMDR is fascinating therapy, and counseling is different for everybody. It affects everybody differently with varying degrees of success. For me, I got into it, had another counselor recommend it. We talked about it with some of our social workers in the ER because we talked about trauma patients because we get a lot of psych, and veterans because we tend to be guinea pigs, right? Get blown up in IEDs for 10 years in Afghanistan, gave a lot of research. EMDR is the same way, and essentially what it does is it uses both hemispheres of the brain and helps neurologically reprogram these memories that I had no idea would be so profoundly linked to things that happen when you're a little kid to the way you behave today is essentially in this vast, beautiful network in your brain. And they're all connected. And I think we tend to think of memories as these individual chunks of our lives that are stored on a shelf in our head, when in fact it's much more of a spider web or ivy. Like there's one seed that plants out and all these little roots grow out and they touch each other and they're all related. So if you've got one that's stored in a way that activates that sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system response, a traumatic event gets stored in your brain and it gets stored in the context of when you were experiencing it. So if you have another experience that's through that network tied to it, it also stimulates that same response. You may be totally unaware of it, but your heart rate's going to speed up. You're going to have anxiety because your brain is telling you that you are in an unsafe environment and there is a threat. And that's hard to live with every day.
Do you think over time that becomes so convoluted and there's so many different spider webs tied together that it's easy to even lose track and have no immediate knowledge of what the specific cause of it all is?
Absolutely. That was one of the most fascinating things about doing EMDR was learning things that are linked that I never in a million years would have put together. And a lot of EMDR is like, okay, where are you at now? You're like, well, I'm 6 and I'm in my bedroom and this happened. Like, okay, you're in a safe place, blah, blah. Okay, where are you at now? And you're like, oh shit, I'm like 25, living in twin. Like, why would that be related? Like you have to pause, like, why would that be related? But they are. And sometimes it's just because the way they're stored in your brain is they touch each other. Like your life is not a series of
secular.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm looking for. Like everything is interconnected, right? And that's one of the beauties of life is friendships that last 25 years.
Yeah.
And this therapy is able to remove some of that context where you can look at it more clinically. And you can experience it, but you no longer have to re-experience it.
Instead of just re-experiencing, you can work through.
Instead of living it, you're watching it on TV. It was super helpful for me, and it is a trip. And like I was telling you, the social workers, like it's like doing ketamine, man, because it alters your perception of reality, and it truly does.
I'm going to have to look into that more because it sounds extremely interesting. And I also think that as we get older, you get more introspective and, where am I now? How did I get here? Is this the person I want to be? Am I, moving myself in the direction that I want to go? But you don't necessarily do the work that you need to actually kind of step yourself back to work through the things that you probably never worked through in the first place. You just maybe bottled them up and, pushed them down and pushed them here and not really giving it the full consideration of they might be driving you in a direction that you might not want to go.
When you look at runners, we're notorious for, I could walk it off.
Yeah, right.
But you look at how much effort we put into, like you're talking about getting older. I think one of those things you start looking more at preventative maintenance, right?
Yeah.
Colonoscopies, and, get your blood pressure checked.
All that fun stuff.
But as runners, like we get new shoes. If we get a hamstring strain, we go get a massage or we get it looked at. If you roll an ankle, you go and get an x-ray.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But we walk around with emotional trauma or these haunting memories and then just be like, well, that's just part of who I am. I'm just fucked up. But we don't do that if our leg doesn't work because we got to run, right? It's the same as if you sign up for a 100-miler. You're not going to wait till that day to be like, I guess I should start running.
Do you think that that's because there's still stigma around mental health and
Absolutely.
addressing mental health? Or do you think and maybe it's a combination of both of these, or do you think it's most people don't know where to start?
I think there's 100% a stigma, and Idaho sucks for mental health.
Yeah.
I think there is a stigma that people tend to latch onto. And there's this weird thing, and I don't know if it's guys, because I hate to base things on like gender or anything like that, because I think a lot of stuff gets applied to it's irrational. But I know in nursing in particular and the Army, there's a lot of flag waving about, look how much trauma I've been through. Like, I'm so fucked up, bro. I'm a mess, man. Almost like proud.
It's a badge of honor.
Right. And it shouldn't be like that. Like,
But they're not continuing that conversation of, and this is what I'm doing to actually work through it.
It's just, and I was guilty of it, man. I mean, you get paramedics together, EMTs, real ER nurses, it's war stories. Like, God, I saw this guy, man, like 12 bullet wound. Like, the worse it is, the more traumatic it is, we talk about it. And I think it's kind of a backhanded way of sharing. Like, working on an ambulance, I sit with paramedics and EMTs. We start telling them war stories, and a lot of it's like horrible things to endure. There's one scene that I wish I had known about and been way more open to counseling when it happened. But long story short, is a guy that was in a fully engulfed vehicle, and I had to get him out afterwards. I was a new guy in the department. And it was like on We Were Soldiers, man. I'm trying to pull this guy out and meat's just coming off my hands.
Oh my goodness.
Terrible, right? But for the longest time, that was like a badge of honor for me. Like, I survived this. I did this. And so when we're all sharing stories about, oh yeah, you did the burn guy. Well, check this out. I had this kid who blah, blah. And we're sharing these stories when it should be in a professional setting or talk to be like, how'd you deal with that?
Yeah.
And most of the time it's like, oh, I didn't. And at the time, I derailed my life significantly because I didn't. At the time, the culture I was in, I was working as a 911 dispatcher, so working law enforcement. I was working on getting onto a fire department. And I grew up. My grandma's a nurse. My mom's an intermediate AMT. Like,
Yeah, I wanted to ask, like, what led you into nursing?
Empathy. But at the time, the culture, especially working with law enforcement, was, we'll just go drink whiskey and not talk about feelings. We'll just get super trashed, and then it'll be fine. And just nobody will talk about it. And I wound up just grenading myself emotionally. Wound up losing a job, because that was the thing, is everybody wanted to be John Wayne, right? Like, you just go drink and party and pretend like it doesn't bother you, because that's how you show how tough you are.
Yeah.
And then later you blow up and kick the dog across the living room because something happened that was completely unrelated, but nothing like that is unrelated. If you don't deal with it, everything moving forward has been touched by that.
Yeah.
So that's my big thing. And that's where running saved me, I think, a lot. And coming back, kind of circle back to ask about what got me into it, was when we came home. I wanted to set a goal. And I think I had talked to you about running a little bit in the past. I was doing 3-4 miles a day there when we were in Iraq, either around the little FOB base that we were on or on a treadmill. And I'd gotten to the point where I liked being out running.
Yeah, I remember we started getting into more dialogue, and I was pretty sure that it wasn't right at the start of your running journey, because you started asking some questions. And then next thing I know, you're years deep into this.
I go hard, man.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. Like, if I do something like, this is pretty cool. And that's the thing. I think it comes back to addictive personalities, right?
Yeah.
But instead of wanting to drink till 4 a.m., I'm like, oh, I could run. And I like this. So I'm going to do this a lot. And that's what happened. Was I remember you recommended Famous Potatoes. And I was like, okay, I'm getting home in September. It gives me about a year. And I wound up injuring myself. I had to do it the next go round. But what happened was they had told us set a goal. And I talked to you and I was like, okay, I'm going to do a half. Then I read Born to Run. And I bought some toe shoes. So I ordered them when I was in Iraq. They got there. I was so stoked. The same day the package arrived from Vibram, we got a memorandum from our sergeant major that those were banned in the Army. You couldn't wear them.
Really?
Yeah, they said they were unprofessional and we weren't allowed to wear them. So
Interesting.
Yeah, and I was pissed. And at the time I was running in like $150 pair of Nike Air Maxes, right? And I'm like, their Nikes are going to be the best. I hadn't read Born to Run yet. But I'd run 4 miles, and then the next day it was like I was 80. I couldn't get out of bed. My hips and my knees.
Were you getting shin splints?
Oh, bad.
Yeah. I don't know what it is about Nikes, and I hate to bang on them because I actually really love their trail shoes. But every time I start talking to people and they start talking about injuries or calf pains or shin splints, you can always ask them, were you running in Nikes?
That's my first question. Is that people ask, does you run into people like, how do you run like that? Like, don't you ever get injured? And I'm like, no. And they're like, yeah, I can't run because my knees hurt. And my first question is like, what are you wearing?
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm a shoe whore. I mean, again, I am a creature of habit. I've got 25 pairs of Ultras in my closet, much to my wife's chagrin.
You find what works, and when everybody's a little bit different. But anyway.
But yeah, that's, I was wearing those. And then when we got home, they tell you on the box, dude, like, hey, if you're starting out running, just do like a mile or two.
Yeah.
So I ran a mile or two and I felt great, right? I'm like, fucking, they don't know. So I did 5 miles and my calves rolled up into my butt. I hadn't used that part of my
Something is wrong.
Yeah. Oh, dude. I was like, well, and the sheer aggravation trying to put those goddamn shoes on the first time.
Oh, yeah.
I
never did it. I never did the toe shoes.
Loved them.
Really, I love Injinji toe socks,
right?
But I never did the toe shoes. I did get into the minimal. We can go off on a tangent of shoe. Oh yeah, zero drop or low drop because I do like lower drop shoes. But anyway, I'll steer us in a different direction there.
But yeah, and I wore those for a long time. The only reason I switched out to the Pearl Izumis is I reached out to you because after 15 miles of road on a pair of Vibrant Baquilas, like they were great, but the bottoms of my feet were just
hammered,
dude, because I was just slapping blacktop. Right?
Yeah.
And then we started with the Pearl Izumis, like the N1s, and I was like, oh
yeah,
well, this is a whole new world.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the Ultras, when Pearl folded, and I got the wide toe box because I get big long monkey toes, man. Like, but it makes a difference. And Born to Run, like I hate to be that guy, like, oh, you guys need to read that book, but you should.
Well, and it's funny because this last conversation I just had with Dan Button, he's a 2:33 marathoner, and we were talking, and that's what did it for it. Really, it was a huge catalyst to many people being exposed to the running world in a way that they never had before, and it really, it changed the nature of the conversations, if nothing else.
And I think it made it more approachable.
Yeah,
for guys
absolutely.
Like me that had. Because how many people like, oh, I only run when I'm being chased.
Right. And we discussed it too, as we have those conversations where, we run around with the flag of anybody can run. Yeah. But with the success of Born to Run, it really started making people believe it. And the sport blew up, which I love seeing. I love seeing more and more people taking
healthy choices.
Yes, healthy choices and
mental
doing
health.
Exactly. And that's the fortunate byproduct of why I love to promote running so much is I love the exercise. I just say exercise is a healthy byproduct of it. Yeah. For me, it's a mental health thing. And let's get into your run streak. You ran every single day for 9 years. How do you balance that, and how much with your other responsibilities, family and work and all that, and how much of it is for the exercise and how much is it to maintain mental health?
Honestly, like 90 mental health.
Yeah.
10. I mean, I enjoy being healthier. Like I said, when I enlisted, I was over 200 pounds, man.
And I was going to say, how tall are you?
Tiny.
Yeah, you're not a big dude.
Yeah, I'm like 145 now, maybe.
Well, and how tall are you?
5'5".
Wow, yeah.
Army says 5'5.5", but I think they were being
Take it.
Yeah. But
you weren't wearing your 5 fingers.
Exactly. Yeah. I was very thick boots. But the streak came about curiosity. Actually, my uncle was a big track guy. He ran at BSU. Was a state champion in high school. Oh, wow. So I was I knew.
So
about
you
track.
went into it with intention. I'm going to start this run streak.
I did. It was curiosity, and I needed to change something. I was in nursing school. I was stressed out. I knew I loved running, and I knew it was good for me. And my wife had been super supportive and saying stuff like, "Have you gone for a run today?" And not even like a criticism, like, "Hey, you're being an asshole. Maybe you should go for a run." Although that was probably a lot of it. A lot of it was like, I think she genuinely saw the Trev that came home was happier than the Trev that left.
Yeah,
and I think I talked to you, and my uncle had done it. He had just put it as one of his yearly goals. I think the year before, he was like, I want to see if I can run for a year. So I was like, well, shit.
I didn't know
Maybe I should give it a try. Like, cause I knew you ran. Like, I knew peripherally a few people. There's not a huge running community where I'm at. And in all fairness, I'm pretty self-isolated when it comes to that. Like, there are running groups, I'm sure. I just have never sought them out.
So you run the majority of the time by yourself?
Almost entirely.
Yeah.
Today's the first time I've run with a partner, and remember that time you ran to Boise from Twin?
Yeah.
That was probably the last time I ran with somebody.
Really?
More than a couple of miles. Like, I'll meet with somebody and they're like, hey, I want to get into running. Will you run with me? I'm like, absolutely, 100%. So I run with them kind of like, all right, and get them sailing on their own. But 99% of the time, it's definitely by myself.
Yeah.
But with the streak, I was like, I wonder how long I can do this. Because I honestly didn't think I could do a year. Day one was New Year's in Salt Lake City. I was hungover. I was with a buddy, Zach. We were visiting another Army buddy. And I was like, well, I'm doing it. I talked a bunch of shit. So I ran around Salt Lake, did a few miles, and then it just clicked. And so I did a year. And that first year, there was a lot of, I got to maintain the streak. But over time, it's just like, I honestly don't think about it a whole lot.
It just became a part of who you are.
It's just part of my day. I brush my teeth every day. I wash my face. Like, I go for a run. And at first, I thought it would be a lot more difficult to build into my day. And it's not. Like, if you're willing to prioritize something, you can do it.
You can find
do
the
it
time.
every day. Like, you prioritize work.
Well, like we were talking to earlier, is those times when you only have 10, 15 minutes, that's a mile.
Yeah.
And
a mile.
You can sneak a mile in, and the times that you only have 10 or 15 minutes in the day to sneak in a mile are the times that you need it the most.
Absolutely. And there's been times I got up a little early, and there's times like, I know I'm being ridiculous. Like, but I also know that, God, I'm so much happier with running.
Yeah.
So I'm making an active choice to put my health first and the people around me. Like, I think my wife would definitely support, like, I'm a better person as a runner than I was before.
Yeah, Tiff's the same with me.
Yeah. And
I will say, though, it's funny because when I did the streak back in 2012, I don't know how many times I'm looking at the clock, different place, drinking a lot. And I was a mess. But I get my run in and I'd look at the clock after being out at the bar, hanging out with the music buddies. And it's 11:30. 11:45 and we're creeping up on midnight. I remember one time, Grant and I hate to admit this, I made him pull over while I was still in my jeans and my Converse. I don't know how many runs I did in my jeans and Converse because it was last minute and I just take off booking with 6 or 7 minutes left to midnight, hauling ass to make sure I got it in before the stroke.
Fear.
Then I was like, okay, I'm going to keep going a few more miles now.
Yeah. And that's how it starts, is especially those runs where you're like, God damn it, I want to run today. Yeah. Because I have them too.
We all have those days where I don't want to.
And my wife actually nailed that one, because there's one time I'm like, I just don't want to go today. And she's like, then that's probably the day you need it the most.
Yeah.
And she was exactly right. And then I think it was supposed to be one of those, all right, I'm going to go out and do like 4 or 5. And then 15 miles later, I get home. I'm like, thanks, babe.
Yeah. Needed that.
Yeah. 100%.
And then there's those times where it's negative temperatures. We've had negative temperatures lately, or deep snow, or 100 plus degrees. And like today, it was dumping on us, and walked outside and we didn't even look at each other, a second time. It's like, there's no question. Are we doing it? It's like, yeah. And we enjoyed the hell out of it the whole way. And it ended up being 10 miles.
Yeah. And that's the freeing thing about like deciding it's going to happen, is it takes away the pressure of the debate, right? So when you're talking to like, are you going to run today? You're like, well, obviously. Yeah. It's not, you're not getting up, like lacing up, like, how am I going to go today? Because if you're questioning it, then there's a chance that you won't. So you're giving yourself that out. And I think Chris McDougall talked about in his book is like, evolutionarily speaking, your body is going to lean towards being sedentary, right? Because as you evolve, you want to conserve that energy. Yeah. So your body, and there's going to be part of your brain, it's like, you don't need to run, dude. It's exercise.
And I need it. I find comfort in movement. Yeah. Even when I'm not running, Tiff will give me shit because I struggle with sitting still. Yeah, there's just something calming about getting out and moving your body. And then the farther you get into it, the troubles start to fall away. The stress is a little bit less difficult to deal with.
I've very rarely had a personal conundrum that could hang for a 25-mile run.
Right.
I got my demons, but they don't have the cardio, man.
That's what needs to be on the next T-shirt. Yeah.
There's been bad nights at work. There's bad nights at home. I can be grouchy. I'm a busy guy.
You are. So some of the other things that you do, you teach speech at the high school you were talking about. You do work with adaptive athletes.
Yeah, which has been another huge benefit. And it all kind of dominoes in, right? As soon as you start saying yes and believing that, like, I can do stuff, I can do hard things. And that's one of the mottos of the adaptive thing is everybody can climb. Like, we have kids with cerebral palsy. We have paraplegics. We have these people that can barely, literally, physically can hardly move, and they're climbing these walls. They might be in a suspension rig that we set up, that we help them get up the wall, but like the glee and joy of helping people exercise and move, like that's the thing. Is I was never like an ADHD kid. Like I wasn't running all over the classroom. I never had that issue. I was really lucky, but it didn't come from me for a place of, I can't sit still. I figured out in my 30s, I just like moving, man. Yeah. And it went into adaptive.
Shifting your perspective.
Yeah. And adaptive, I got to go to a national festival where it's all these adaptive athletes from all over the world and the country that come together in Kentucky for it's like the Shangri-La of rock climbing at Red Rocks in Kentucky. Mm. And these are like sponsored athletes. Like I think people didn't think of adaptive climbers like, it's a kid with no legs or a kid with cerebral palsy. They're helping them up. These are guys that are sponsored by major climbing companies that are doing like 5'11" routes I couldn't do on my best day. And they're just cruising it with one arm.
Wow. And I'm guessing there's no question in their mind that whether they can, they are going to do.
Right. Oh, dude. And working with visually impaired climbers, and nobody makes fun of the handicap more than disabled people. They are hilarious and cynical and sarcastic. Like I could just go on and on about stories of these amazing people. It was cool. There's the guys that I with, we were sitting around the campfire and we're talking, like, it was a very surreal feeling. If you felt like the odd man out, like we're the weird kids in class because we don't have any disabilities. We've got all our limbs and extremities and no major diagnoses, and we're the weird ones here. It's super neat, and it really is good for your context and your appreciation.
Humbling.
Yeah. Well, and God damn, I'm a lucky dude. Like, and that's the way I look at my running. Part of the reason it's been easy to maintain a streak is every run I see something that I wouldn't have seen if I hadn't left the house. Every trail, to just run around Jerome. Like, I run the same 4 miles. If I have to work and I woke up late.
You know your route. You know how long it'll take.
Eyes closed, man. But every day there's something else that I didn't see. And it might be something really good, something really bad. But generally, it's always a lot of people wave. I try and wave as many people as I can.
I had somebody that used to give me shit about that because I wave at everybody. And
nice.
And
I thought it was just me.
Oh, no, I wave at everybody. And he was like, they're not waving back. And I was like, you know what? But I still be waving. I will wave at everybody. But the ones that do, it makes your day. You see their face light up, light you up. And there's not enough of that. People are too lost in their own thing that they don't take a moment to even make eye contact and share a smile or a wave.
I remember being in a real dark place when I was younger. I remember feeling really isolated. Like, if I just had one person that wanted to say hi to me today, that would be great. So when I started running and waving, like, I might be passing that dude who's feeling the same way. And if I throw a wave and he waves back, like, that altered the shape of their day just a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, somebody waved to them. They're like, somebody acknowledged that they're a person and they're alive.
Yeah.
And
that might have been exactly what they needed.
Yeah. And in a little town like Jerome, man, like, now I see familiar faces. I know cars.
You're that guy.
Yeah. And I used to have all these farmers would pull over because I'd be out in the middle of nowhere, right? In like a 20-mile run. And these good old boys pull over like, you need a ride, man?
You okay?
No, I'm out on a run. They're like,
on purpose?
On purpose. They're like, yeah. And they're like, whatever. And they drive off like shaking their head because there aren't that many people out running around Gooding County or Jerome County out in the middle of nowhere, just waving their arms and singing along to
with a smile.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Running's given me that too, is especially with like nursing, we see bad things. Mm-hmm. But like even with running, your legs might be tired or you're thirsty or whatever, but you get to run, right?
Yeah.
And nursing's the same way. These bad things happen, but I get to be a nurse. I worked my ass off to get that job and that education and spent the money and incurred debt. Like, I jumped through a lot of hoops, put my family through me going from, because I had a career. I was a 911 dispatcher. I was good at it. I made pretty good money. Like, I had a pretty stable situation. And then I was like, how about I just go back to college?
What took you off on the turn?
I got back from Iraq and I'd been a dispatcher, and so was my wife. It's where we met. And before I deployed, she'd been offered a promotion. And we talked to him a little bit about what's this going to do to our mutual careers. And like, well, we worked together for like 9 years. So if it was going to be an issue, it'd be an issue. We assume she just beats you in the parking lot. As long as it's outside work, we don't care. I'm like, cool. Well, I got back and applied for promotion. They're like, oh, you can't. She's got this position. And I was really offended at the time. I was like, we discussed this. They're like, well, shit changes, man. So as in all things, I called my mommy. And I was like pissed off. Like, this is bullshit. And she'd been telling me for a while, because part of the advantage of joining the National Guard was there's educational benefits. Mm-hmm. She's like, you would love nursing. And my grandma told me when I was 18, graduating high school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, which I eventually settled on. I was going to pursue a fine arts degree at BSU and just be a cartoonist for a living. And she was like, maybe you should be a nurse. And I was like, this is stupid. Like, get bossed around by doctors all day. Like, no way. And then I kind of wish I'd listened to her, but at the same time, I don't know if I had the maturity in my early 20s to get through nursing school. I barely had the maturity in my 30s to get through nursing school.
Tiff and I talk a lot about hindsight. It's easy to look back and say, well, if I would have done this, but you wouldn't be the person you are today and have the perspective that you do now.
There's no way I'd be as good as a nurse as I am if I hadn't been a dispatcher. Like, all these experiences, which kind of dovetails into the whole concept. Like, it's all this big tapestry, right?
Yeah.
Like, I get to be who I am today because everything that happened before. I'm a better nurse because of ugly things that happened when I was a kid, because I can relate to kids that are going through ugly things.
Yeah.
I'm better at talking to people who have suicidal ideation or are struggling, because I had suicidal ideation and I struggled.
You've been there.
Yeah, I can share that. So being able to empathize, get back to that, is this huge theme that runs through. And the more you experience good and bad, the more you can share. Because you can sympathize with somebody. Like, menstrual cramps is probably not something I'm going to be able to empathize with. I can sympathize, it's going to suck. But if I tell my wife, like, oh, I know how that feels.
Yeah, you've lost all credibility.
She's like, get out of here. Like, and how egotistical is that? It's just to assume that you know how somebody else is feeling. You've never been through it. So the more good and bad we experience, the more empathy we can have. That only comes through getting out and experiencing things. I know what it feels like to be super dehydrated on a long run and feel like you have to pee every 30 seconds, but you can't pee because you're having bladder spasms because you're so dehydrated. I know what that feels like. So if somebody comes in and talks to me about it, I'm like, no, I get it.
Yeah.
Like, that sucks.
You can share a story. And again, then you're immediately building some trust right there.
And that's the thing, is we all have this interconnectivity that it's just waiting to happen if we can find a way to find that.
Yeah, it's waiting for the communication. It's waiting for somebody to start the dialogue, to even have the curiosity, or again, back to the empathy or the compassion, to say, hey, how are you? And if you're not good, why are you not good? And start asking those probing questions to actually get a better idea of what they're trying to get across to you.
Yeah, because we all ask, is there anything I can do? And we mean it, but essentially it's putting the weight on that person. Like, you think of something that I can do for you. Tell me what it is, and then maybe I'll do it.
Yeah.
And they're already struggling. So it's better to just share that experience. What are you going through? This. Oh, man, I know how that feels.
Great
You have
point.
to be careful not to get into that territory of making it about you, right? Like, you don't want to be self-centered enough to be like, oh, you're going through that? Well, let me tell you about when it happened to me. But if you're willing to share, like, oh, man, I know that feeling, and still maintain that focus on not just them and patronizing, but you as a team.
And that goes to the art of the conversation. And that's something that I explore a lot, even in these dialogues with these conversations, is I really struggle with how much do I share in the interaction, because the last thing I want to do is steer away. And there is an art to that conversation, to your point, where it's you're trying to give them safe space and say, not only do I understand and here's why, and give them the reason, your experience, but then shifting it back around to, okay, I've shared this with you, but it is about you. And I want to hear more about you and what you're thinking and feeling, so I can figure out the best way to help you.
Yeah, you're giving them enough where you've got a little credibility.
Yeah.
And I used to be a lot worse about that. It's something I struggle with sometimes, because I get so excited to share, like, oh, dude, I went through that too.
Yeah. Our favorite thing to talk about is ourselves.
Yeah. EMDR helped tremendously with that. Because I remember friends being like, dude, it's not about you. And at the time I was like, fuck you.
It is.
But then you think about it, you're like, oh shit, like, my intention wasn't to make it. My intention was to share that I understand, but especially hurt people. And when you have that damage, you don't know that you're operating from that context unless somebody points it out for you. And,
that's a
and
great
the
point.
EMDR really helped me create a better context of being okay, being vulnerable. We have this idea that, especially in healthcare professionals, we're supposed to be the knowledgeable ones, right? We always know the answer. And frankly, a lot of times we do, because we have the education. When I talk to patients, I try to help them feel like they are the expert on them. I don't know them. I don't know what they've been through. I don't know what their daily life consists of. I have a lot of education in medicine and dealing with what they're presenting with. But I think people respond better to acknowledging, like, hey, I'm not saying I know you better than you. You know you better than me, and I'm listening to your input. But maybe what you're telling me might have more consequences than you realize, or gives me better clues that applies my education. It's not that I'm saying I know more, because then that was the big thing with COVID.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that without completely derailing. How did that impact you and change? Because it was a mass exodus in healthcare when COVID hit, because it was like there wasn't a full understanding of what the experience was like. But you made it through. You seem to have, I don't want to say anybody thrived finding their way through. Well, and maybe, like, how did you find your way through that? And how did you deal with it? And what did you learn?
Well, I had a bit of an advantage. I worked in the ER. ICU got it bad, right? In my experience. And every nurse's experience is different. In mine, where I was at, more people died in ICU than died in the ER. And the ER's kind of like, you see a lot of Fight Club memes, because tend to be a little more fast and loose. And honestly, it was pretty scary at the beginning, because you had to wear all this PPE, right? We're in like multiple masks and gowns, and nobody knew. The only thing I equated it to is when we were talking to the veteran nurses who were working when the AIDS pandemic hit, right? Because they didn't know what it was at first. Initially, it wasn't called AIDS. It was just, oh, it's in the gay community, which was horrific. You look at the consequences of that, is they didn't take that disease seriously because it was this marginalized society. Whereas COVID was equal opportunity. So it got a lot more attention, and it went fast, and people were dying, and there were so many rumors about how you could get it and what happened. And then it became a political thing. The vaccine came out, and then holy shit.
Yeah.
I have no interest in engaging in the debate about it too much. I did what I felt was right for me, but I also had the perspective. I was in the Army. When we deployed, they lined us up and gave us a bunch of vaccinations. They were like, what's this? And they're like, it's shut the fuck up. Next. And we're like, oh, okay.
Okay, thanks.
So when the vaccine came out, I was like, it's probably nothing worse than what the Army gave me. But I didn't fault nurses who were like, I'm not taking that.
Yeah.
I felt like a lot of them.
It was so hard to engage with anybody because it's hard to be clear that you're not picking a side. Right. It's not right or wrong. It's just different.
And what I read into it, as far as the available research that was being published, combined with my own personal perspective and my willingness to take that risk. Like, I lived next to a burn pit in Iraq. I breathed in dead people. I did a PT test with ashes falling on me. I've had worse things in me than an FDA-approved vaccine that, probably got rushed a little bit. But when they're stacking bodies in trailers, you kind of have to do something. Yeah. But I also don't fault the people that were like, I'm not comfortable putting this in my body.
Yeah.
I can respect that. Everybody had to make their own individual decision. The only part that got difficult for me was when it became this super political tribal thing of, oh, you took the vaccine, you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
You're a sheep. I heard that all the time. Oh, you're just a sheep. You can't think for yourself. I'm like, no, I did think for myself. I just came to a different conclusion than you did. And I had patients arguing with me at the front desk in the ER that COVID isn't real when 50 feet away from me, there were people dying on a ventilator from COVID. There was a guy, this really happened. This guy's screaming at me like, he didn't want to wear a mask. COVID's bullshit. They just made it up. And there was a guy 2 seats down from him just coughing. He's like, well, I've got it and it feels pretty real. That's what disappointed me so much as I saw, and it wasn't just inpatients, nurses and a lot of them, there was walkouts because it was handled poorly by some people. It was that lack of empathy because from an administrative purpose, they want to protect as many people as they can. They felt okay saying you should have the vaccine. So they mandated it. So you had a lot of healthcare professionals like, who are you to mandate to me?
Right.
And rightly so, especially where Americans were fiercely independent. I didn't fault anybody on any side. I just kind of stayed to myself and didn't engage because I did what I felt was right for me and my family.
And my smile wasn't because I found any humor in it. All I'm thinking is, how many Altoids did you have?
Shit.
How many
The worst part
boxes
was
did you
wearing
have
the
to go
mask
through?
and how many Altoids I bopped against the mask for. I was like, oh shit, right.
Need another one.
And actually, COVID saved me a lot of money on Altoids, so I couldn't eat nearly as many because I always had to have a mask on.
Oh my God.
And there is humor. Like that's one of the things from nursing, and I think it's like running is we have this dark sense of humor, right?
Yeah.
You hear guys laughing and talking about being on ultras running overnight and hallucinating.
Oh yeah.
If you're the average person, like, hey, you're going to be so exhausted that you're going to hallucinate. Not only are you not going to quit, like, we're going to laugh about it, and you're just going to keep going. People are like, you're out of your goddamn mind.
Yeah.
Which I hear all the time. Oh, you're crazy. I don't
Like,
feel
sign
crazy.
me up.
Yeah, and that's...
You're going to trash your feet. You're not going to be able to walk for a week. You know? That
dude,
just
so
sounds like
right
a
now,
blast.
so you can see my toenail. That's the first one that's ever done that.
Really?
Ever. Like, because I'm like, maybe I'm not a real ultra runner. I've never lost a toenail. And then a few weeks, I ran that 27 miler Sunny Wet through the canyon.
Uh-huh.
I got almost like, my toe hurts. And I was like, oh, I'm a real runner. I think I'm going to lose a toenail.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Yeah, but
Where do you think you're going to go with the streak? Is it just going to continue on in perpetuity? Not going to hit 10 years and say, okay, I hit 10 years, I'm going to take a break.
no, because there's no appeal to me in taking a day.
Yeah.
Being able to run every day isn't like a goal. It's a blessing.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. Cause like we talked about, I got back on my streak and it's been well over a year and I haven't missed a day through, and I absolutely love it. Whatever inclement weather happens to come, I look forward to that because it's different. It's a new challenge. If the snow's a foot deep, like it was, a few weeks back, it's okay. Now I'm high stepping and it's leg day. Yeah. Today we're getting wet. Well, I've been through a lot worse.
Yeah.
It could always be
At
worse.
least it's not raining ice. Kentucky, it rains ice.
Oh,
This is snow in Kentucky. It just shoots icicles from the sky. It's ridiculous.
It's like daggers.
Yeah. I was at Fort Knox. I remember being like, you guys don't even have good snow here.
Oh my gosh. I always equate it back to, we were talking about dark times. Those points in life where, without going too deep into it, I kind of shared a little bit of, where I was at personally at some points in my life and, curled up in a ball on the floor. It just felt like nothing was worth it anymore. Yeah. And everything else in context is not that fucking hard. And I hate to say it so matter-of-factly because, we all have difficult things that we have to struggle through and endure. But by context, to your point, it's a celebration every time I get to go out the door, whether it's a short run, it's a long run, whether it's a race, whether it's self-supported. And like you, I run most of the time alone. It's a meditative thing for me and it's an adventure. I want to go out and I want to look around. I don't want to take my time and I want to experience whatever I happen to have for that day, whether it's, a 25-mile run across town, like you're saying, to get a cup of coffee or whatever it is. It's you come back and you feel like you've accomplished something and you were just in such a better space that everything's a little bit better. Everything's a little bit brighter.
Well, and I think, because I've been in that same space of nothing's worth it. And the root of that is you're saying, no, I'm not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But every day I run, I'm showing I'm worth that.
Yeah,
right? Like,
that's a great point.
And there's so much in our lives that's out of control. Like working in an ER or any job, really. Something's going to happen during the day that you can't plan for. You could be on your way to work and somebody runs a stop sign, you get hit. The whole direction of your day has changed. You can't control that. But if I go for a run every day, I have at least some ownership of part of my day and my run might change. I might get turned around. Like, I know we're kind of short on time. You want to hear my cool cat story?
Oh, we got all the time. You tell me.
So one of the many, many, many benefits I've had from running is I went out and run, and it's when I run pretty frequently, it's a little 7-miler. I go out to a little blinking light intersection and I come back. It's just an out and back. Normally I hate out and backs, but this one, it's just the right distance for before work and it's familiar and lots of people wave because I've been doing it for years now. So I get there's this dude, Jimmy, who drives a mail truck and he'd always just lay on the horn and throw devil horns out the window.
Nice.
And one day I was headed out before work and I work nights. So it was like 4 p.m, sunshine, it's beautiful. And in between songs, like I hear this like meowing sound, like a yowl. So I stop and I look around. I'm like, because you have to run that many times, like, it's like
something's off.
If you walk in your house and something's been moved, you just kind of know something's off, right? So that's like how familiar that route is. So I stop and look around, and this kitten comes out from underneath this bush. Like one eye's all boogery and it's kind of dragging itself. I'm like, well, I can't leave it here. Like it would haunt me.
I did that and I brought home a deer.
That's right. I related deeply to that. How long ago was that?
Oh God, that was, I don't know, 8. No, not even that long ago. Probably 6, 7 years ago.
Right. But you come home with this.
Packed that thing down the mountain on my shoulder, put it in the car, brought it home.
Yeah. So I showed up this kitten and it was probably like 2.5 miles into the run. So I scoop it up and it's yelling. So it's obviously hurts. I'm like, well, I head home with it. And every step it's yelling. So it's like this endless stream of, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. Yeah, God, stop. I know. Like, so we get to the house and our dogs are pretty cat friendly because we had a cat. But I didn't know about an angry, excited, stranger cat. So I knock and my wife's like, why does it sound like there's a wild animal outside our door? I'm like, look what I found. And poor Chris, I'm like, come in. I'm like, hey, I got to get to work. But
Here you go.
We had a kennel. I'm like, so I'm going to put this kitten in the kennel, a little bit of water. I'll take it to the vet in the morning because the vet's already closed. And she's like, oh, okay. I'm like, it's got to quiet down. Like, we just got to get her comfortable. So I leave for work, come back in the morning. I come inside. I'm like, hi. She's like, your cat has not stopped since you left. I'm like, oh, shit. I'll take it to the vet. I'm so sorry. So I take it to the vet, drop it off. And they're like, whose cat is it? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just found it
on the side of the street.
Well, who do we call? I'm like, I guess me or my wife. Like, just give us a call and let me know. I'm going to bed. I've been up all night working. So I go home to go to bed and I get up that afternoon. I come out, I'm fixing my coffee. My wife's standing there. And I could tell, like, something. She's got something to say. I'm like, hey, did the vet call? And they're like, yeah. Your $1,000 cat's having surgery, and it'll be ready to come home in about 2 weeks.
Oh, my gosh.
That's your cat, asshole.
Wow.
Yeah.
You just bought yourself a cat.
Very expensive cat.
Holy shit.
So we get her home, and she's got a little cast on, and she hangs out. And she still, to this day, this was like 3 years ago. Now, if she sits on a counter or ledge, she just drapes that leg. Full mobility. She has no impairment at all, but she still drapes that leg. But when we brought her home, Chris is like, this is your goddamn cat.
Oh, wow.
Like, so we're naming it something to do with you. I don't have anything to do with it. This is your problem because she had to stay up all night with it, right? Like the whole thing. So she named it Ivy, like Ivy. So we have Ivy, and that goes back to like that's that beauty of running, right? Is every time I leave the house, that could happen.
Yeah,
it could be a totally boring run where my legs hurt, and I'm just not feeling it because those happen too. Like every run isn't a miracle.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's just, God damn it, I got to get a few miles in because I know I'll feel better. And
even if you don't feel amazing, you still feel better.
And I did it.
Yeah,
I know, even if it sucks, I'll feel better than I did if I hadn't.
You know, that's a great point because that's one of the things I love about it is every single day I know I will accomplish something.
Yeah. Or at least I'm making myself available to the opportunity of finding a new kitten. Or there's been times it came up on crash scenes or saw sunrises that I'm like, not to over romanticize, but genuinely some just the aesthetic experiences we have.
Yes.
Listened to that podcast last night with Ranko where he's talking about being on top of the mountain, looked at the stars, 360 degrees. If he hadn't started running, he never would have seen that.
Yeah.
And we separate ourselves from the people who have just because we don't go out the door.
Exactly.
And that's why every day I run, I'm like, maybe I'll enjoy it. Maybe this will be a totally mundane run, but maybe something amazing could happen.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take away that opportunity. I spent way too much of my life muddling in fear of change and wanting to control everything. And we overthink all these things.
Yeah.
And running, you can plan a run, but it's still mostly reactive because you know, like this morning we head up the trails like, it's just, they're too wet, they're too greasy. We're going to destroy this trail. Yeah. So we end up running down an old neighborhood.
Let's turn left here. Let's go.
Like
let's turn back around and go back up this way.
That's how adventures happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if we don't go out the door, we never get to have them. Mm-hmm. If I had never...
We wouldn't have seen the deer sitting there wanting to come over and say hello.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and we may be the only people on the planet that got to see that this morning.
Right.
The people that have that house may never looked out the window.
Yep.
So they're going to live their whole lives not knowing there's a deer hanging out on their front step. We know because we went outside.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's why I love running. And nursing's the same way. It's every single day I get this opportunity to help somebody. And it's hugely therapeutic to make yourself vulnerable enough to tell somebody like, I'm here to help you.
And mean it.
Yeah. I'm a better person. And there's still like, I have so much improvement in these goals that I set. And a lot of it's just like spiritual. Like I want to be a better, and I'm not a religious person at all, but going to Iraq and being around people where religion is such a huge part of their culture. Yeah. I may not feel that. I may not agree with a lot of it, but I can respect their faith. Yeah. The same way people respect, oh, you guys run every day. Holy shit, that's amazing. This is just part of my day, right? It's like saying, oh, you tie your shoes every day? You brush your teeth every day, which not everybody does. Like, I'm sure you get plenty of patients that miss the boat on that one. But if you make these extraordinary things as part of your day, they don't have to be extraordinary. They get to be the ordinary, wonderful things.
Which actually, it's something I've been thinking as we're having this discussion, and I'm watching your mannerisms as you're sharing all these amazing things. it ties into something that I think is absolutely beautiful about you, is knowing where we were when we were younger and seeing where you're at now. That truly it's beautiful about you is how absolutely authentic you are. There's no pretense or false bullshit. Like, you are just fucking comfortable with who you are and the skin you're in. And part of this whole experience to me is all about authenticity, because we all struggle with it so much, and there's no effort on your part. You are just truly authentic and who you are and happy with it and comfortable with it. And I wish I had more of that, to be honest with you. It's such a beautiful thing. It floors me, man.
Thank you. First of all, thank you. And I think authenticity comes from, I genuinely love a lot of the things I do. Like, there's a lot of things about myself, like, it is like, there's a lot of internal things that you want to fix.
Yeah.
If you were genuinely doing that self-examination with the goal in mind of being better and not just being self-critical and punishing yourself, if it's a goal of critiquing, not criticizing, there's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
And I think if we can find the joy in it, because you choose to do it, right? Can you imagine running an ultra with somebody who just bitched the whole time about how they hate running? Like, why'd you sign up for this, man?
Yeah, I'd create distance.
Like, you have the opportunity to find joy in really miserable things. Like, you find a lot, especially in the ER, emergency medicine. This is bullshit. This patient doesn't need to be here. You have the same thing as a dispatcher here, people. This is a bullshit call. They shouldn't have called 911. And yet we tell people, if you have an emergency, call 911 or go to the emergency department.
Yeah.
We train them since they're kids. If you have a problem that you cannot help and you need help in an absolute emergency where there's no one else to turn to, come to us, and then we'll treat you like shit for it. And I see how it happens, man. I do. But I also have been really fortunate enough to have the context of being able to, like, yeah, they're here for ankle pain, which means I don't have to start an IV. Nobody's going to die. They're probably not going to poop on me. Like, this
no
poop
so in
easy.
Your pocket.
Yeah, like, find the joy in what you do. And that's where it comes back to.
And we all have the opportunity to change if we choose to.
You're going to embrace either a sedentary life where all this experience goes by outside, or you can stand in it. And some of it's going to suck. There are going to be days that it rains and every trail leads up forever. But I was thinking of all the runs, seeing the sun come up down at Zion.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have done
nothing like it.
No, 15 years ago, like, cool, I played video games today. And I remember that was a fulcrum point for me when I really started getting into running was, I like sitting around as much as the next guy, but like, do I want to spend the day playing video games where at the end of the day, nothing in the universe is different from me being here? Or I can go for a run and I can find a cat, or I can wave at somebody. And if I wave at 100 people and one waves back, like, I'm relevant, right?
Yeah.
And if I never choose to do anything, then I never choose to be anything.
Yeah. But you got to get out and get in the game.
Yeah, man, that's where everything's happening.
That's it. All right, brother. Well, we're going to wind this thing down. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions here.
Please.
I know that you're a huge music fan as well. So I want to ask you, if your life was had a musical playlist, what would be the title track?
All right. So I go hard for Everlong, man.
Yeah?
I'm a Foo Fighters guy. I remember seeing them live was like a life-changing thing.
Yeah.
I took my son. It was like one of his first big shows. My wife took him to see 21 Pilots, but his first like rock show. Because that's what they think of Foo Fighters. That's like old, like you think of rock bands, right? Like Dave
They are
Grohl.
the quintessential like rock band. Yeah.
But it's hard, man. Like,
why that song?
Because it jams, but it's beautiful. We talk about the whole tapestry thing. It's the same thing with music. Like, I got a pretty wide array when I throw on my headphones, right?
Yeah, that would be another discussion that we're going to have to dive into at some point here.
Juvenile enough that I like Bloodhound Gang.
Oh, yeah.
But I also I love the blues, listen to John Lee Hooker a lot, R.L. Burnside. But Rage Against the Machine, man, I was hard.
Oh,
like hard rage. And then it goes back to like, what mood am I? What emotion am I in? But as far as an anthem,
Everlong.
Danger Zone, dude.
Oh, there you go. Nice. Love it.
Go wrong. But Top Gun when I was a kid, right?
Yeah.
Coolest movie ever. But I noticed after a while, there's a lot of songs about running.
And maybe it's just that we're paying attention to it, especially if you're out on a run.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, because I hear that too all the time. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
But I also, like, if I'm having a hard day, man, not to blow sunshine, but Coco Pele, Fly to Void, because those are comfort blankets, right?
Well, it's as much a part of your story as it is mine.
But I have the added benefit of when I listen to those bands, I hear the voices of my friends.
Ooh, interesting.
So I hear Joel Klime's voice, not just singing, but I think of all the times
everything else that comes along with it.
Drinking beer. That's not an emotional, like, I'm wrapping myself in a warm blanket because I know everybody. Like, that's just one of those comfort items.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's so many memories with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and not all music. It's just that fraternity.
It's the trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. All right, and I'm going to ask you this last one here, which I'm really interested in your answer because I wasn't just blowing smoke. I think it's absolutely amazing the man that you've become and the person that loves life as much as they do sitting across from me. And so my last question is, what's the legacy that you want to leave behind?
I talk about empathy a lot because it's one of those things that people miss. And it's so simple. But the legacy I want to leave behind is I want people to have felt cared about. And I hope that I inspire them to want to help someone else. And more now than ever. As I go on, it gets stronger is if you can find that sincere joy of knowing that someone's life's just a little bit better because you were part of it for just a minute, that's hugely rewarding. Like, I'm not that altruistic. I'm not that good of a guy where I just love making everybody else happy. Like, it makes me happy to do that. Like, I get endorphins. Like, I get dopamine from my job, the same as running. Like, everybody talks about the runner's high. There is such a thing as like compassion high, empathy high. Like, genuinely helping someone, not because it benefits you, because it benefits them, which rewards you. And if I can leave a legacy of people learning that feeling and help try and inspire new nurses or some of the kids at Adaptive or the kids on my speech team or just people I ran into, there's no better feeling than somebody saying, I helped somebody because you made me look at it differently. Like, that's a huge legacy, right? And that carries on. If people that I helped are helping others, that continues on. That's like a generational
ripple effect.
Yeah, it never stops. People that never will ever have heard of me, that I was never even a factor in their life, will have a little bit better because I helped somebody who was able to help them. Like, that's huge. That's the legacy that I think I want to shoot for is I want to be the guy that helped people.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
And it speaks volumes to your character because it's who you are. It really is. And I absolutely love that about you, man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
And we're definitely going to have to do this again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right, brother.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah, we'll talk again soon. And that's it. I want to extend a sincere thank you to my good friend and guest, Trevor Churchman. And as always, I would also like to extend my sincere appreciation to you for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Run from the Norm podcast. I hope you were entertained, and most of all, I hope you found value in this conversation. I know I did. You can find more episodes on your favorite streaming platform, and you can also learn more by typing in www.runfromthenorm.com into your preferred web browser. Remember, getting outside for even 15 to 20 minutes a day can do wonders for your mental health. And our mission with everything we do is to motivate with compassion, listen without judgment, inspire with curiosity, one person at a time. I hope we have succeeded. Thanks again for listening, and watch for the next episode of the Run from the Norm podcast coming soon. Stay authentically you, and get outside and run from the norm.
Check that mic, make sure it sound right, boy.